When we feel like we are losing control of a conversation, our first instinct is often to talk more. We think if we just explain ourselves a little better, use more words, or repeat our point in three different ways, the other person will finally get it and agree with us. But the truth is, the more we over-explain, the less powerful our words become. It is like pouring water on a strong drink. It gets weaker with every extra drop. Over-explaining can make us sound desperate for approval rather than confident in what we are saying, and that takes away our authority. There is also a psychological effect at play here. When you give too much explanation, you invite the other person to keep poking holes in what you are saying. The more detail you give, the more opportunities they have to interrupt, challenge, or redirect the conversation. Suddenly, you are no longer leading the interaction. You are defending yourself against every little point they throw back at you. This is exhausting and it drains your energy fast, leaving you frustrated and powerless even if your original point was completely valid. Over-explaining often comes from a place of fear. Fear that we will be misunderstood, fear that we will be judged, or fear that the other person will think badly of us if we don't justify every choice we make. But that fear pushes us to talk too much, and by doing that, we give away control. Confidence is quiet and measured. When you state your point clearly, calmly, and then stop talking, you leave space for the other person to think and respond. That silence shows that you trust your words to stand on their own. There is also a time factor involved. Long-winded explanations make people tune out. If it takes you 10 minutes to explain something that could be said in one, you risk losing the attention of the person you are talking to. And when someone stops listening, you have no influence left over them. They may nod along, but their mind is somewhere else. Over-explaining doesn't make your message stronger. It makes it easier to ignore because it sounds like background noise rather than a clear and intentional statement. This does not mean you have to be cold or short with people. It means you must practice delivering your message with precision. Say what you need to say once and then stop. If they have questions, they will ask and then you can clarify. But wait for them to ask first instead of preemptively defending yourself. This not only keeps you in control, but also sets a healthy boundary that says you will not spend your energy convincing someone who has already decided not to listen. When you stop over-explaining, you start to notice how much calmer conversations become. You no longer feel rushed to cover every possible angle or anticipate every possible objection. You speak, you breathe, and you let the silence work for you. People pay closer attention when you do not flood them with words because your message becomes sharper and easier to process. Over time, this habit builds respect because it shows that you are confident enough to speak with clarity and then move forward without begging for agreement. One of the easiest ways to lose control in a conversation is by reacting instead of responding. A reaction is quick, emotional, and usually automatic, while a response is deliberate, measured, and thought through. When someone says something that triggers you, your body wants to jump in right away. Your heart rate goes up, your brain goes into fight or flight mode, and words start coming out before you have even processed what was said. This is when we blurt out things we later regret or escalate a situation that could have been handled calmly. Reacting often gives the other person exactly what they want. If they were trying to provoke you, your reaction shows them that they succeeded. They now control the emotional tone of the conversation, and you are playing defense. You might raise your voice, interrupt, or talk over them to get the upper hand back, but that only fuels the fire. The more heated it gets, the less logical you sound, and the easier it is for them to dismiss your point entirely. Taking a moment to respond rather than react shifts the power back to you. When you pause, even for a few seconds, you give your brain time to move from emotional thinking to rational thinking. That pause feels uncomfortable at first because silence can feel like losing, but it is actually the opposite. That silence allows you to choose words that keep you in control and communicate clearly rather than emotionally. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending that things don't bother you. It is about expressing them in a way that does not hand over control of your behavior to someone else. A well-timed, calm response is far more powerful than a fast reaction. It shows composure, and composure is a signal of strength that others notice. People are less likely to push your boundaries when they realize they cannot shake you. Another benefit of responding instead of reacting is that it lowers the emotional temperature for everyone involved. When one person stays calm, it is harder for the other person to stay angry. Your tone, your pace, and your choice of words can bring the conversation back down to a level where actual problem solving can happen. You can disagree firmly without yelling, you can correct someone without shaming them, and you can protect yourself without making the situation worse. Practicing this takes time because our first impulse is often to fire back right away. Start by catching yourself in the moment and noticing when your body tenses up or your voice gets faster. That is the signal to pause. Take a breath, let a beat pass, and then speak. Even a short pause gives you enough time to choose a better word or a calmer tone. Over time, this becomes a habit, and you start noticing how many arguments never turn into full-blown fights simply because you chose to respond with control instead of reacting with emotion. Silence in a conversation can feel heavy, almost like it needs to be filled right away, but rushing to talk is one of the fastest ways to lose control. When there is a pause, most people feel uncomfortable and start scrambling to say something, anything, just to break the quiet. This often leads to oversharing, apologizing for things that don't need an apology, or agreeing to something we don't even want just to make the moment less awkward. Silence is not your enemy. It is a tool that can work in your favor if you let it. When you fill every pause, you give away more than you need to. You might reveal information that was never asked for or backtrack on a boundary you were trying to set. The person you are talking to may even use this to their advantage, staying quiet on purpose just to see what else you will say. People do this in negotiations, arguments, and even casual conversations because silence has power. The one who can sit in silence the longest usually has the upper hand. Silence also gives weight to your words. When you make a point and then stop talking, your words have space to land and sink in. If you rush to fill the gap, you take away the impact of what you just said. The other person doesn't get time to think about it or process it because you are already talking again. Leaving that space forces them to engage with what you said instead of waiting for you to keep explaining. This can feel uncomfortable at first because many of us were taught that good communication means constant talking, but real confidence is being okay with stillness. It shows that you trust your message enough to let it stand without decorating it with extra words. The more you practice this, the more you notice how often silence actually makes other people open up more because they feel the need to fill it themselves. Another hidden benefit of silence is that it gives you time to observe. When you stop talking, you start noticing the other person's body language, tone, and reactions. You get more information about what they are really thinking, which helps you choose your next move wisely. If you are always talking, you miss those cues because you are focused on what you are going to say next instead of listening and watching carefully. Learning to be comfortable with silence is one of the most underrated communication skills. It takes practice to resist the urge to jump in, but every time you let the pause hang there, you are reminding yourself that you are in control. Your words are more deliberate, your presence is stronger, and your conversations feel less rushed. This small shift can completely change how people respond to you because they can feel the calm confidence behind your choice to say less and let the silence do some of the work. So many conversations go off track because the focus shifts from being understood to being right. When your goal is to prove that you are right, the tone of the conversation becomes competitive instead of collaborative. It turns into a battle of who can win instead of a discussion where both people feel heard. This is where defensiveness creeps in, and suddenly it feels like you are talking past each other instead of with each other. When you are focused on being right, you stop listening and start waiting for your turn to argue. This approach makes the other person feel attacked, even if that is not your intention. People naturally push back when they feel like they are being proven wrong, so the harder you try to prove your point, the harder they try to defend theirs. What could have been a productive conversation quickly becomes a debate where both sides are just stacking up evidence to score points. The more you push, the more resistance you get, and the cycle continues until both people feel frustrated and unheard. The real goal of communication should be understanding. When you aim for understanding, you are not giving up your position or agreeing with the other person. You are just creating space where both perspectives can exist long enough to be heard. This lowers the temperature of the conversation and helps build trust because people feel respected when you actually try to see things from their point of view. And when they feel respected, they are more likely to respect you in return. Talking to be understood also gives you more control over the outcome because it slows things down. Instead of rushing to prove yourself, you can ask clarifying questions and respond thoughtfully. This keeps the conversation calm and constructive. It also prevents you from saying things you might regret in the heat of the moment because you are no longer fighting to win, you are listening to learn. That subtle shift changes the entire energy of the exchange. Focusing on being understood does not mean you have to let go of facts or ignore the truth. It means you present those facts in a way that invites conversation instead of confrontation. You can state your point clearly, share your reasoning, and then leave room for the other person to respond without turning it into a contest. The aim is to build clarity, not crush the other person into agreeing with you. Clarity is what leads to better decisions, stronger boundaries, and healthier relationships. When you stop talking just to be right, you also stop wasting energy on battles that do not matter. Not every disagreement needs to be turned into a victory. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let go of the need to win and focus on what you actually want to achieve. This keeps you grounded, keeps the conversation productive, and most importantly, keeps you in control of yourself instead of letting your ego take over and run the show. One of the most common ways to lose control in a conversation is by using absolutes like always and never. When you say things like, you always do this or you never listen, you instantly put the other person on the defensive. They stop hearing the point you are making and start focusing on proving you wrong. They will bring up the one time they did listen or the one situation where they didn't do the thing you are accusing them of. The conversation shifts from the actual issue to an argument over your exaggeration. Labels work the same way. Calling someone selfish, lazy, or inconsiderate might feel like the truth in the moment, but it attacks their character rather than addressing their behavior. People shut down or fight back when they feel labeled because a label feels permanent. Instead of motivating them to change, it makes them dig in deeper to defend who they are. This is how small disagreements can escalate into full-blown fights that leave both sides feeling unheard and disrespected. Using absolutes and labels also limits the possibility of real resolution. If someone is told they always mess up, they might start believing there is no point in trying to do better because nothing will change how they are seen. It removes nuance from the conversation and makes it feel like everything is black and white. Real life is not like that. People are complex, situations are different, and using absolute language paints everything with one brush, which is rarely accurate. The goal of communication should be to get to the truth of what is happening right now, not to sum up someone's entire character in a single sentence. Instead of saying you never help around here, you could say I felt overwhelmed today when I had to handle everything alone. Instead of saying you are selfish, you could say I felt hurt when my needs weren't considered in that decision. This keeps the focus on the behavior and the impact it had on you rather than attacking the person. This shift in language makes it easier for the other person to stay engaged instead of becoming defensive. They are more likely to respond with curiosity rather than anger because you are inviting them into a conversation instead of cornering them into an argument. You are also modeling respectful communication, which sets the tone for how you expect to be treated in return. That keeps the conversation constructive and puts you back in control of how it unfolds. It takes practice to break the habit of using absolutes and labels because they often come out when we are frustrated or angry. But catching yourself in the moment and rephrasing your words can completely change the outcome of the interaction. You start to notice that conversations become less combative and more solution focused. The person you are speaking to feels safer to admit when they are wrong or take responsibility for their actions because they don't feel attacked. This is how you keep your power, maintain respect, and create space for real change to happen